A 34-year-old single mother paid just $8,000 for a sealed Hollywood property that everyone mocked her for buying. Her wealthy siblings laughed at her desperate gamble. But when she discovered what Marilyn Monroe had hidden inside before her death in 1962, she realized she'd inherited not just $255 million in secrets, but also a conspiracy that would put her children in mortal danger. Sarah Mitchell's hands trembled as she stared at the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. 72 hours. That's all she had left before her daughters, 7-year-old Sophie and 12-year-old Emma, would be sleeping in her 15-year-old Honda. The notice fluttered in the hot Los Angeles breeze, mocking her with its cold bureaucratic language. Past due amount, $4,300. She peeled the paper off slowly, not wanting Sophie to see it when she came home from school. The apartment smelled like the dollar store strawberry, shampoo she'd been using to stretch her budget, mixed with the scent of ramen noodles. The third night in a row they'd eaten it for dinner. Her bank account showed exactly $473. Her next shift at the diner didn't start until tomorrow, and even then, after a full week of double shifts, she'd be lucky to clear $600 after taxes. The morning had started like every other morning in the past 18 months. Wake up at 5:30. Make breakfast from whatever was left in the nearly empty refrigerator. Today it was oatmeal, the cheap kind that came in a giant cylindrical container, flavored with a drizzle of honey she'd taken from the diner in individual packets. Emma had complained. Sophie had eaten hers without a word, those big brown eyes watching Sarah with an awareness that no 7-year-old should have. The awareness that Mommy was drowning. Sarah's phone buzzed. Another text from her ex-husband's lawyer. Still no child support. 18 months of broken promises. She deleted it without reading the full message. She'd learned that rage was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when she needed every ounce of energy just to survive. Her older sister Victoria's Instagram story popped up as she scrolled mindlessly, trying to distract herself from the panic clawing at her chest. Victoria was at some charity gala in Beverly Hills, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Sarah's entire year of rent. The caption read, "Giving back to those less fortunate," with a champagne emoji. The irony would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. Their brother Marcus had commented with champagne emojis. Neither of them had responded to her desperate text from 3 days ago asking to borrow $2,000. Not even a no, just silence. The apartment walls felt like they were closing in. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, in a building where the elevator had been broken for 6 months and the air conditioning only worked when it felt like it. But it was home. It was stability for Emma and Sophie, and in 72 hours, it would be gone. Sophie's school had sent another letter about unpaid fees for the field trip to the Science Museum. $35. Such a small amount, but it might as well have been $3,000. Emma needed new shoes. Her toes were cramping in the ones she'd been wearing for 8 months, the fabric splitting at the seams. And Sarah's car registration was due next week. Another $200 she didn't have. The Honda's check engine light had been on for 3 months. She was driving on borrowed time in every possible way. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Probably another debt collector. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb hit the green button. A feeling, an instinct, the same instinct that had told her to leave her ex-husband 6 months before he'd completely drained their savings to feed his gambling addiction. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" A woman's voice, older with a slight tremor of emotion. "Speaking. Miss Mitchell, my name is Dorothy Callahan. I was your great-aunt Helen's estate attorney." A pause, heavy with something Sarah couldn't identify. "I'm very sorry for your loss." Sarah blinked. "I'm sorry. Who?" "Helen Morrison. She was your grandmother's sister. She passed away last month at the age of 96. Sarah had never heard the name. Her mother had died when she was 12, breast cancer that had eaten through her in 6 brutal months, taking most of the family history with her. Her father had remarried quickly, within a year, and moved to Arizona with his new wife, cutting most ties with his late wife's family. Sarah had been raised by her maternal grandmother until she was 18, but Grandma Rose had never mentioned a sister named Helen. "I didn't know her," Sarah said carefully, her mind already racing. Why would someone she'd never met leave her anything? "She knew of you." Another pause. heavier this time. Miss Mitchell, your great-aunt left you something in her will, a property in Los Angeles. Sarah's heart skipped. Property? In Los Angeles? That could mean salvation. She could sell it, pay off her debts, find a new start, maybe even keep the apartment. What kind of property? It's a studio building in Hollywood. Rather old, I'm afraid. It's been sealed since 1962. Your great-aunt was very specific in her instructions. She wanted you to have it. Sealed. What did that mean? Sarah's pulse quickened. Why was it sealed? Dorothy Callahan's voice dropped lower, as if she were afraid of being overheard. I don't know the full story. Your aunt never explained. But I can tell you that she received offers to purchase that property regularly over the years. Substantial offers. She refused them all. How substantial? The most recent was for $500,000. Cash. No inspection. The buyer didn't even want to see inside first. Sarah's breath caught. $500,000 for a building someone had never even looked at? Who was the buyer? A corporation. Multiple corporations over the years, actually. Different names, but I suspect they were connected. Your aunt always said no. She told me once that the building contained something important, something that needed to be protected until the right person could handle it. And she thought I was that person? Sarah said, disbelief coloring her voice. She never even met me. She knew more about you than you might think. She kept newspaper clippings, your high school graduation announcement, your wedding announcement, and your divorce filing. She tracked your life from a distance, Miss Mitchell, and when she was dying, she told me that you were the one, that you'd understand what needed to be done. After Dorothy provided the address and explained the property transfer process, Sarah sat in the darkening apartment, her mind churning. The address was 8491 Franklin Avenue. Dorothy had texted her photographs of the building. It looked abandoned, condemned even. A narrow three-story structure wedged between other buildings, its facade covered in old notices and graffiti. But someone had offered $500,000 for it. Sight unseen. Sarah Googled the address. Nothing came up except old property records and tax assessments. The building had changed hands a few times over the decades, but always stayed sealed, always stayed empty. The current property taxes were $8,000 in arrears, which explained why her aunt's estate was eager to transfer it. Sarah would have to pay those taxes within 30 days or lose the property to the city. $8,000. The exact amount that would also cover her eviction debt and buy them a month of breathing room. It was almost too perfect, too coincidental. Her phone buzzed again. Victoria, finally responding to her 3-day-old plea for help. Sarah, you need to stop asking us for money. Marcus and I worked hard for what we have. Maybe if you'd made better choices, you wouldn't be in this situation. You need to figure it out on your own. We can't keep bailing you out. Keep bailing you out. As if they'd ever helped her once. As if asking for $2,000 after 18 months of silence was somehow a pattern of dependency. The message hit like a slap. Better choices. As if getting pregnant at 22 with a man who seemed stable, who had a good job as a financial analyst, who promised forever, was a moral failing. As if his gambling addiction that only revealed itself after the wedding was somehow her fault. As if working 3 jobs while raising 2 daughters alone after he disappeared with their savings was evidence of poor character rather than extraordinary resilience. Sarah looked at the eviction notice again, then at the address Dorothy had given her. Franklin Avenue. 40 minutes from her apartment if she left now, before traffic got worse. She needed to see this building. Needed to understand what she'd inherited. Because something in Dorothy Callahan's voice, something in the story of a woman who'd refused $500,000 to keep a building sealed, told Sarah this was more than just real estate. This was important. Dangerous, maybe, but important. She grabbed her keys. The building at 8491 Franklin Avenue looked like it had been forgotten by time itself, wedged between a Vietnamese restaurant that smelled amazing and a dry cleaner that had closed decades ago. 3-story structure was narrow, maybe 20 feet wide, but stretched back deep into the lot. Its Art Deco facade had faded from what must have once been cream and gold to a sickly beige and rust. Heavy iron gates covered the ground floor windows, and a steel door bore multiple padlocks. City notices from various decades were plastered across it. warnings about abandoned properties, code violations, asbestos assessments. But underneath all the decay, Sarah could see hints of what it had been. Elegant geometric patterns carved into the facade. Art Deco light fixtures, now dark and rusted, flanking the door. A faded sign above the entrance that she could barely make out. Whitmore Studios. Sarah stood on the cracked sidewalk as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Franklin Avenue. Her daughter's school pickup time was in 2 hours. She had maybe 90 minutes to explore before she had to leave. Her phone rang. Dorothy Callahan, the estate attorney. Ms. Mitchell, wanted to give you the entry codes before end of business, but I should mention something that happened after our call. Her voice had changed. There was tension in it now. Fear, maybe. I received a call this afternoon from a Mr. Richard Strauss. He represents a private buyer who's offering $25,000 cash for the property, sight unseen. He was quite insistent, aggressive even. $25,000. Sarah's breath caught. That would solve everything. Debts paid, security, deposit on a better apartment, a real buffer for the first time in years. She could breathe. Did my aunt receive similar offers? Many, over the years. Starting in the 1970s, shortly after she sealed the building. The offers increased over time. 5,000 became 10,000, became 50,000. The last offer, the $500,000 one, came just 3 months before she died. She refused it from her hospital bed. Who was the photographer? The one who owned the studio? Dorothy was quiet for a moment. A man named James Whitmore. He was quite famous in the 1950s and early 60s. He photographed all the major stars. Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, James Dean. But he was known for being more than just a celebrity photographer. He was a confidant. The stars trusted him, told him things they wouldn't tell anyone else. Sarah's pulse quickened. What happened to him? He died in 1962. August. Heart attack, the records say. He, my God, was only 41 years old. Your Aunt Helen was his assistant for 3 years before his death. She sealed the studio immediately after he died and never spoke of it again. Never went inside, as far as I know. Just paid the property taxes every year and refused every offer to sell. Why? What was she protecting? I don't know. But she told me once, about 10 years ago when I pressed her on why she wouldn't sell, that James Whitmore had been murdered. That his death wasn't natural. And that, if she ever opened that studio, if she ever let the wrong people inside, more people would die. After hanging up, Sarah approached the steel door with a new sense of dread mixing with her curiosity. Dorothy had texted her the codes for the padlocks. 7 different locks, each with a different combination, each one added over the decades. It was like her great-aunt had been layering protection, making it harder and harder for anyone to get inside without her permission. It took Sarah 20 minutes to work through them all, her fingers fumbling with the stiff mechanisms. The locks were old, corroded, fighting her at every turn. When the last one finally clicked open, she had to use both hands to pull the heavy steel door. It resisted, the hinges screaming from 62 years of disuse, a sound that echoed down the street and made a few passers-by turn to look. The smell that wafted out made her step back and cover her nose. Dust, thick and choking, mildew from 6 decades of moisture with no ventilation, and something else underneath it all. Old perfume, sweet and musky and floral, clinging to the stale air like a ghost refusing to leave. Sarah pulled out her phone's flashlight and stepped inside, letting the door close behind her with a heavy thud that made her jump. The reception area was frozen in time, a perfect capsule of 1962. A curved reception desk sat in the corner, its surface covered in decades of dust so thick it looked like gray velvet. A rotary phone still sat on the desk, its cord trailing down to a wall jack. A typewriter, an old manual one, sat beside it with a piece of yellowed paper still loaded in the roller. Sarah approached the typewriter carefully, her footsteps leaving tracks in the dust. She could make out the typed words on the paper, faded but legible. August 3rd, 1962. Client, Emma Monroe. Session time, 2 p.m. Private sitting, no assistance. August 3rd, 1962. 2 days before Marilyn Monroe died. Sarah's hands began to shake as she looked around the reception area with new understanding. Magazine covers from 1962 lined the walls. Their colors faded but still visible. Life, look, photoplay, modern screen. And there, in the center of the wall behind the reception desk, a framed photograph that took Sarah's breath away. It was Marilyn Monroe, but not the Marilyn everyone knew. Not the blonde bombshell with the perfect smile and the carefully constructed image. This was Marilyn without makeup, without the performance, sitting in what looked like this very studio, with a book in her hands. Her face was serious, intelligent, vulnerable, and across the bottom, in flowing script, to James, who sees the real me, forever grateful. Norma Jean, August 1962. Norma Jean. Marilyn's real name. The name she'd been born with before Hollywood had transformed her into an icon. Sarah stood there for a long moment, staring at that photograph, trying to process what she was understanding. Her great-aunt Helen had worked for Marilyn Monroe's photographer. This building, sealed since Monroe's death, had been one of the last places Marilyn had been before she died. And someone was desperately trying to buy it, offering $25,000 without even asking to look inside first. What had Marilyn left here? Sarah moved deeper into the building, her phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The hallway beyond the reception area led to a larger space, and when she pushed through the door, she found herself in what had clearly been the main photography studio. It was larger than she expected, maybe 40 feet long and 30 feet wide, with high ceilings and skylights that were now so dirty they let in only dim, filtered light. Heavy blackout curtains still hung from ceiling tracks, frozen in mid-draw. Professional lighting equipment from the 1960s stood like skeletal sentries in the corners, their bulbs long dead, their cords wrapped neatly. A large wooden camera, the kind that used film plates, sat on a heavy tripod in the center of the room. But it was the walls that made Sarah's breath catch and her legs go weak. Photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Every available inch of wall space covered in black and white images, all of them of Marilyn Monroe. But these weren't the glamorous publicity shots Sarah had seen in movies and magazines and documentaries. These were different, private, intimate, real. Marilyn laughing without makeup, her face unguarded. Marilyn reading, her brow furrowed in concentration, glasses perched on her nose. Marilyn crying, her vulnerability captured in stark black and white. Marilyn angry, her finger pointing at someone off camera. Marilyn tired, slumped in a chair with dark circles under her eyes. Marilyn frightened, looking over her shoulder as if checking to see if someone was following her. These weren't public images. These were private moments, captured by someone Marilyn trusted completely. Sarah walked slowly. Along the walls, her phone's light illuminating photograph after photograph. Many were dated, written in white ink in the corner. June 1959, October 1960, March 1962, July 1962. The collection spanned years, but the images from 1962, especially from the summer of 1962, showed a woman in crisis. In the July photos, Marilyn looked ill, too thin. Her famous curves had disappeared. Her eyes, even in the black and white images, looked haunted. In one photo, she was clearly arguing with someone. Off camera, her mouth open mid-shout, her hand raised. Sarah's phone buzzed, making her jump. Emma, asking when she'd be picked up from her friend Olivia's house. Sarah texted back that she'd be there in an hour, then turned her attention to a door at the back of the studio. It was smaller than the others, almost hidden behind a tall filing cabinet that had been pushed close to it. The door was locked, but not with a padlock like the exterior. This lock was built into the handle, a combination, dial-like on a safe. Sarah tried a few obvious combinations, her heart pounding. Monroe's birthday, August 5th, 1930. The numbers didn't work. The year of her death, 1962. Nothing. She was about to give up, frustrated and running out of time, when she noticed something carved into the doorframe. The marks were almost invisible under layers of old paint, but when Sarah scraped at them with her fingernail, she could make out numbers. EO8 0530, August 5th, 1930. Monroe's birthday, but formatted differently. European style, day before month. Sarah input the numbers. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the silent studio. The room beyond was tiny. barely larger than a closet, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet. But every wall was covered in shelves, floor to ceiling, and every shelf was packed with film canisters. Hundreds of them, maybe 1,000, each one labeled with dates in neat handwriting ranging from 1959 to August 1962. Sarah pulled one canister at random, her hands trembling. July 15th, 1962. She opened it carefully, expecting the film inside to be degraded after 6 decades. But the sealed environment had protected it. The negatives were pristine, still in their protective sleeves. She held one up to her phone's light. Even as a negative, she could make out Marilyn Monroe sitting in what looked like this very studio, talking to someone off camera. Her expression was a mix of anger and fear. Behind her, Sarah could see a man in a suit. She couldn't make out his face clearly from the negative, but something about his posture suggested authority, power, someone used to being obeyed. Sarah's phone rang again, making her drop the negative. She caught it just before it hit the floor. Unknown number. Ms. Mitchell, a man's voice this time, smooth and practiced, professional, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who closed expensive deals for a living. My name is Richard Strauss. I believe Dorothy Callahan mentioned me. The buyer. I'd like to revise my offer. $50,000. Cash. Wire transfer today. You could have the money in your account within 2 hours. Sarah's mouth went dry. 50,000. That wasn't just survival money. That was life-changing money. New apartment. New car. Emma could go to the private school she'd been begging for. Sophie could have the pink bicycle she'd been staring at in the store window. Sarah could stop working. Double shifts could actually see her daughters more than an hour a day. That's very generous, Sarah heard herself say, but I need to think about it. I just got here. I haven't even seen the whole building yet. Ms. Mitchell, with all due respect, you're looking at a condemned structure in a marginal neighborhood. The property taxes alone are $8,000 in arrears. The building probably needs complete remediation before it could even be legally occupied. 50,000 is more than fair for a property in this condition. Something in his voice, an edge of desperation underneath the professional veneer, made Sarah's instincts flare. The same instincts that had told her to answer Dorothy's call. The same instincts that had made her leave her ex-husband before he could destroy them completely. If it's such a bad property, why do you want it so badly? Why pay 50,000 sight unseen? Silence on the other end. Just for a moment, but long enough for Sarah to catch it. Then, more carefully, it's a good investment for my client. Hollywood real estate, even in that condition, appreciates over time. Then why not wait until I'm required to list it publicly? Why pay such a premium now? Time is of the essence for my client. They're looking to close several properties this quarter for tax purposes. Who's your client? I'm afraid that's confidential. Sarah looked at the film canisters surrounding her. Hundreds of hours of Marilyn Monroe's life, hidden for 62 years in this tiny room. Someone wanted this building desperately enough to offer 50,000 without even seeing inside. And her great-aunt, a woman who'd lived modestly, who'd worked as an assistant her whole life, had refused $500,000 to keep whatever was in here sealed. I need time to think about it, Sarah repeated, her voice firmer now. Ms. Mitchell, I really must insist that we close this today. My client is prepared to go as high as 75,000, but only if we reach an agreement immediately. 75,000. Sarah's head spun. That was generational wealth for her family. That was security, safety, everything she'd been fighting for. But why? Why so much money? Why such urgency? I'll call you back, she said, and hung up before he could protest. Her hands were shaking again as she grabbed another film canister. August 1st, 1962, 4 days before Monroe's death. She opened it, pulling out the negatives carefully, holding them up to her phone's light one by one. More photographs of Marilyn in the studio, but these showed her looking worse. Gaunt, ill, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. In several images, she was holding up documents to the camera, as if showing them to the photographer intentionally, as if creating a record. Sarah squinted at the negatives, trying to make out what was written on the documents. But it was impossible in this light. With the images reversed, she needed proper equipment. needed to see these images as they were meant to be seen. She spent the next 30 minutes carefully inventorying the film room, her pickup time for Emma rapidly approaching. Besides the film canisters, she found boxes of contact sheets, the small proof prints photographers use to select images. She found filing cabinets filled with notes in neat handwriting. James Whitmore's, she assumed. She pulled out one of the notebooks at random and opened it. The entries were dated, like a diary. July 12, 1962. M called in tears again. Said she's being followed. Black cars with government plates. She's terrified. I told her to go to the police, but she says they won't believe her. She says the men following her work for people too powerful to fight. July 18, 1962. M showed me her diary today. The things she's written. The names. The details. If this ever gets out, it will bring down the entire government. I told her to destroy it, but she refuses. She says it's her insurance policy. I'm frightened for her. July 25th, 1962. The calls have started. Men with no names telling me to stop seeing M. Telling me the photographs I've been taking are dangerous. How do they know about the photographs? Is my studio bugged? August 1st, 1962. M came to the studio today looking like death. She said they've been drugging her, trying to make her seem crazy so no one will believe her when she tries to tell the truth. She's brought me everything. The diary, the letters, the photographs of them together. She wants me to keep it safe, to publish it if anything happens to her. August 3rd, 1962. Last session with M. She looked me in the eye and said, "If I die, James, you have to promise me it wasn't an accident. Promise me you'll tell the truth." I promised. God help me, I promised. Sarah's hands trembled so badly she almost dropped the notebook. This was real. This was Marilyn Monroe's final days, documented by someone who loved her, someone she trusted. And 2 days after that last entry, Monroe was dead. And 5 days after that, James Whitmore was dead too, heart attack at 41. Sarah's phone rang. Emma, irritated now. "Mom, where are you? Olivia's mom wants to know when you're coming." 5 minutes, baby. I promise. 5 minutes. She took photographs of several pages from Whitmore's notebooks with her phone, then reluctantly left the film room, locking it behind her. She'd come back. She had to come back. But right now, her daughter needed her. As Sarah locked up the building, replacing all 7 padlocks with fumbling fingers, a black sedan pulled up to the curb 20 feet away. It idled there, engine running, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. Her heart rate spiked. She walked quickly to her Honda, got in, locked the doors. The sedan didn't move, just sat there, watching. Sarah pulled away from the curb. In her rearview mirror, she saw the sedan pull out behind her. It followed her all the way to Olivia's house in Isamite, Silver Lake. When Sarah parked and got out, the sedan drove past slowly, then disappeared around the corner. But 15 minutes later, when she was driving home with Emma chattering about her day, the sedan was back, 3 cars behind them, following. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she'd been to the studio, and they wanted her to know they were watching. Sarah's blood ran cold as she thought about her daughters. Sophie at home with the neighbor. Emma beside her now, oblivious to the danger. These men, whoever they were sending a message. We know where you live. We know where your children are. Be smart. That night, after the girls were asleep, Sophie curled up with her worn stuffed rabbit and Emma with her phone charging beside her pillow. Sarah sat on her couch with her laptop and dove deep into research. She started with James Whitmore. There wasn't much online about him, but she found references in books about Hollywood's golden age, in biographies of the stars. He'd photographed. He'd been respected, talented, known for his ability to capture genuine emotion rather than just glamorous poses. But one detail appeared in multiple sources. Whitmore had been planning to publish a book in late 1962, a collection of photographs with extended commentary from the celebrities themselves. Marilyn Monroe was supposed to write the foreword. The book was going to be called Behind the Image, Hollywood's Hidden Truth. The book had never been published. Whitmore died in August. The project died with him. Sarah searched for his obituary and found it in the Los Angeles Times archives. Respected photographer James Whitmore, 41, died of a sudden heart attack at his Hollywood studio on August 7, 1962. Whitmore was known for his intimate portraits of Hollywood's elite, including Marilyn Monroe, with whom he had completed a photography session just days before her tragic death. He is survived by his sister, Margaret Whitmore of Pasadena, and his longtime assistant, Helen Morrison. Helen Morrison, Sarah's great-aunt, the woman who had sealed the studio immediately after Whitmore's death and kept it sealed for 62 years. Sarah searched for anything connecting Whitmore's death to Monroe's. She found conspiracy theory websites, forums full of speculation, but nothing concrete. Until she stumbled across a digitized FBI file, partially redacted, from 1962. The file was about Marilyn Monroe's death, part of the Bureau's investigation into potential communist connections. Most of it was blacked out, but certain phrases had survived the redaction. Subject's relationship with the Attorney General poses significant security risk. Subject has been observed keeping detailed records of conversations. Subject's photographer, James W., may possess compromising materials. Recommend immediate action to secure all materials and neutralize any remaining security threats. The date on that last recommendation was August 6, 1962. One day before James Whitmore died. Sarah sat back, her heart pounding. The FBI had been watching Marilyn. They knew she'd been keeping records. They knew her photographer had those records. And the day after they recommended immediate action, Whitmore was dead. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't conspiracy theory madness. This was documented government interest in suppressing whatever Marilyn Monroe and James Whitmore had been preserving. Sarah's phone rang at midnight, jolting her from her research. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Don't go back to that building. A woman's voice, old, frightened. This is Dorothy Callahan. I'm calling from my personal cell phone. You need to listen to me. After I gave you those codes today, someone broke into my office. Tonight, they took Helen's entire file. Everything about the property transfer, everything about you. Who? I don't know. But Ms. Mitchell, I've been practicing law for 40 years. I've handled hundreds of estates, thousands of property transfers. I've never seen anything like this. Someone is very, very serious about getting that building, and now they know you have access to it. Did you call the police? Yes. They took a report. But Dorothy's voice dropped to a whisper. One of the officers, when he saw the case involved the Whitmore studio, he made a phone call, stepped outside to make it, and when he came back, he told me it was probably just a random break-in. Said nothing. Valuable was taken, so there wasn't much they could do. But Ms. Mitchell, Helen's file was valuable. To the right people, it's extremely valuable. And that officer knew exactly what building we were talking about. After Dorothy hung up, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the photographs on the studio walls, about James Whitmore's notes, about the hundreds of film canisters in the tiny locked room, about Marilyn Monroe's last days, her fear, her insistence on creating a record. What had Marilyn known? What had she documented? And who was so desperate to keep it hidden that they'd been suppressing it for 62 years? The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work. She'd never done that before, not even when she'd had the flu so bad she could barely stand. But she couldn't go to the diner today, couldn't pour coffee and smile at customers while her mind churned with questions and fear. She dropped the girls at school, watching carefully for the black sedan. It was there, parked half a block from Sophie's elementary school. Different location, but same car. Same message. We're watching. Sarah drove aimlessly for an hour, making sure she wasn't followed, then headed to a camera store in Burbank she'd found online. The place specialized in vintage equipment and film processing. If anyone could help her understand what she'd found, it would be them. The owner was an elderly man named Frank Torres, probably in his mid-70s with thick glasses and hands that trembled slightly as he moved around the shop. But his eyes lit up when Sarah explained what she needed. Negatives from 1962, he said. Sealed environment? They might be in perfect condition. Film from that era, if it was stored properly, can last indefinitely. But scanning them properly, that's specialized work. We're talking high-resolution scans, careful handling. For the quantity you're describing, we're talking thousands of dollars for a complete job. Sarah's heart sank. I don't have thousands of dollars. I have $400 to my name and an eviction notice. Frank studied her for a long moment, his eyes kind behind the thick lenses. This is about Marilyn Monroe, isn't it? I remember when James Whitmore died. I was just starting in this business. Everyone in the photo community was shocked. 41 years old, healthy as far as anyone knew. And then he just drops dead days after Marilyn. You knew him? Not personally, but I knew his work. Everyone did. He was brilliant, and he was one of the few photographers Marilyn really trusted, especially toward the end. The rumors were that he had photographs, materials, things that would have caused real problems for powerful people if they ever got out. What kind of problems? Frank looked around the empty shop, then leaned in closer. The Kennedys, John and Bobby. Everyone in Hollywood knew Marilyn was involved with them. But the details, the extent of it, that was kept quiet. There were rumors that Bobby Kennedy had told Marilyn things, pillow talk about government operations, about Cuba, about the mob, things that would have been devastating if they became public. And you think Whitmore documented it? I think Marilyn asked him to. I think she knew she was in danger, and she wanted insurance. But then she died, and then Whitmore died, and whatever evidence existed disappeared. Frank paused. Until now, maybe. They talked for another hour. Frank explained what would be needed to properly scan and preserve the negatives. He offered to do a sample job, just 1 or 2 rolls, so Sarah could see what she had before committing to the full project. His price was fair, $300 for the sample. Almost all the money Sarah had left, but she agreed. They arranged to meet the next day. Sarah would bring a selection of canisters, enough for Frank to assess, but not so many that she'd risk losing everything if something went wrong. As Sarah drove home, her phone rang. Richard Strauss again. Ms. Mitchell, have you had time to consider my client's offer? I'm still thinking about it. I'm prepared to revise the offer one more time. $200,000. Cash. Wire transfer today. You'd never have to work another day in your life. $200,000. Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel. That was generational wealth for her family. That was college for Naichiro 732, Emma and Sophie. That was a real house, not an apartment. That was security. Forever. But why? Why would anyone pay $200,000 sight unseen for a condemned building? Who is your client, Mr. Strauss? Ms. Mitchell. I've explained that's confidential. Then let me guess. Someone connected to the Kennedy family? Someone with a vested interest in keeping Marilyn Monroe's secrets buried. Silence on the other end. Long enough for Sarah to know she'd hit the mark. When Strauss spoke again, his voice had changed. The professional veneer was gone. Now he sounded cold, threatening. Ms. Mitchell, you're playing a very dangerous game. My client has been protecting certain interests for a very long time. They have resources you can't imagine. Connections at every level of government. If you think you can expose anything, sell anything, profit from anything in that building, you're mistaken. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Take the money. Walk away. Forget you ever inherited that property. And if I don't, then you'll discover that some secrets are protected by people who don't negotiate. My client's next offer won't be money, Ms. Mitchell. It will be consequences. He hung up. Sarah pulled over, her hands shaking too badly to drive. She sat in a grocery store parking lot, her heart pounding, trying to calm her breathing. They'd just threatened her, openly threatened her. She thought about her daughters, Sophie's innocent face, Emma's bright curiosity. They were all she had in the world, all that mattered, but she also thought about Marilyn Monroe, a woman who'd been frightened, who'd been followed, who'd been drugged and gaslit and ultimately killed. A woman who'd tried to create a record, tried to protect herself, tried to tell the truth. And James Whitmore, who'd promised to tell that truth and died for it. And her great-aunt Helen, who'd protected that truth for 62 years, waiting for the right person to finally expose it. Sarah made her decision. She wasn't taking the money. She was going to see this through. But first, she needed to protect her daughters. She called her ex-husband's mother, a woman she'd always gotten along with despite her son's failures. Linda, I need a favor. A big one. Can Emma and Sophie stay with you for a few days? Maybe a week. Linda didn't ask many questions, bless her. She'd always known her son was a disaster, had always treated Sarah with kindness, even after the divorce. Of course, honey. Is everything okay? I'm working on something. Something important, and I need to know they're safe. Bring them over tonight. They can have the guest room. We'll make it an adventure." After arranging for the girls to stay with Linda in Riverside, an hour away and hopefully far enough from whoever was watching them, Sarah went back to the studio. She waited until after dark, parking 3 blocks away and approaching on foot, checking constantly for the black sedan. The building was dark, silent. Sarah unlocked the 7 padlocks with fingers that fumbled less now that she'd done it a few times. She slipped inside and locked the door behind her. In the film room, she worked quickly, selecting canisters systematically. She took August 1962, the month of Monroe's death, July 1962, the month leading up to it, and a few from earlier years, 1960 and 1961, to establish context. 20 canisters in total, enough to tell the story, but not so many that Frank couldn't process them quickly. She was packing the canisters carefully into her shoulder bag when she heard it. Sound from the front of the building, the heavy door creaking open. Sarah froze. She'd locked that door. All 7 padlocks. She'd been careful. Footsteps. Multiple people. Heavy boots on the dusty floor. Moving through the reception area into the main studio. "Check everything," a man's voice said, muffled but clear enough. "The films, the notes, the files. My orders are to sanitize completely. Nothing leaves this building." Sarah's heart stopped. Sanitize. That meant destroy. They were here to destroy evidence. She looked around the tiny film room desperately. No other exit. No windows. Just shelves of canisters and a single door that led back into the main studio, where intruders were now methodically searching. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking, muted it completely, and started filming. If something happened to her, if these people did whatever they were planning, at least there would be evidence. She texted Emma's grandmother Linda with a simple message. "If something happens, to me, protect the girls. The studio has proof of Marilyn's murder. I'm going to expose it." She hit send, then opened her email and sent the video of the intruders to Dorothy Callahan with the subject line, "Urgent, in danger at studio." The footsteps drew closer. Sarah could see flashlight beams playing under the door of the film room. "Boss said there's a back room," another voice said. Younger, less confident. "Behind the filing cabinet. That's where the films are." They knew about the film. Room. They knew exactly where to look. How? Had they been watching the building? Had they seen her go in there yesterday? Sarah grabbed as many film canisters as she could stuff into her shoulder bag. She'd already selected 20, but now she grabbed more. 30, 40, as many as would fit. If she was going down, she was taking the most important evidence with her. The door handle turned. Locked. Thank God. Sarah had locked it behind her out of habit. "Break it down," the first voice commanded. Sarah looked up frantically. The room had a drop ceiling, the kind with removable acoustic panels that you could push up. Without thinking, she climbed onto the shelves, using them like a ladder, praying they wouldn't collapse under her weight. The door below shuddered as someone hit it hard. Once, twice. Sarah pushed up a ceiling panel and hoisted herself into the crawl space above. Decades of dust filled her lungs immediately. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from coughing, from making any sound that would give her away. The space above the ceiling was cramped, maybe 2 feet of clearance, crisscrossed with pipes and electrical conduit, and the metal framework that held the ceiling panels. Sarah lay flat on her stomach across 2 support beams. The bag of film canisters pressed against her chest, her phone clutched in her other hand. Below, the door splintered open with a crack like a gunshot. "Empty," someone said, "but recently disturbed. Look at the EBC dust patterns on the shelves. Someone was just here. She's in the building. She has to be. Her car is 3 blocks away. We saw her come in. Search every room. Check everywhere." Sarah lay perfectly still in the crawl space, barely breathing. Through the gap where she'd removed the ceiling panel, she could see 3 men in the room below. They wore dark clothes, professional looking. Not thugs. More like security contractors. Ex-military, maybe. They began pulling canisters off the shelves. Systematically, checking labels, setting some aside. "These are the important ones," one of them said, reading dates. "July and August 62. These are what the boss wants gone. What about the rest? Take them too." We torch the whole building once we secure the primary evidence. Make it look like an electrical fire. Building this old condemned, no one will question it. They were going to burn the studio. Destroy everything. 62 years of protection. 6 decades of her great-aunts. Vigilance. All about to go up in flames. Sarah filmed everything through the gap, capturing their faces, their conversation, their systematic destruction of evidence. Her phone was on silent, but the screen glowed in the darkness of the crawl space. She angled it carefully, praying they wouldn't look up. "Call it in," the first man said, the one who seemed to be in charge. "Tell them we've got most of the high-priority materials. But the Mitchell woman was here recently. Some canisters are missing. We need a full team to sweep her apartment, her workplace, anywhere she might have taken them. What about her? If she's in this building, we find her. If she's not, we have people watching her daughter's schools. She'll surface, and when she does, we make it clear that cooperation is her only option." Her daughters. They'd just mentioned her daughters. These men knew where Emma and Sophie went to school. Sarah felt rage mixing with her fear. These bastards were threatening children to protect secrets from 62 years ago, to protect the reputation of men who were long dead. The men left the film room, their footsteps receding as they moved to search other parts of the building. Sarah waited, counting to 100 slowly, then to 200. When she was sure they'd moved to the upper floors, she carefully lowered herself back down from the crawl space. The film room was destroyed. Canisters everywhere, some opened and ruined by careless handling. Whitmore's notebooks, scattered and torn. But Sarah had her bag, had 40 canisters, had documentation on her phone of men destroying evidence. She crept to the film room door and peered out into the main studio. Empty. The men were upstairs. She could hear them moving around on the second floor, their footsteps creaking on old boards. Sarah ran. She bolted through the studio, through the reception area, to the front door. It was unlocked now, left open by the intruders. She slipped out into the night and ran down Franklin Avenue, not stopping until she was 3 blocks away, gasping for breath beside her Honda. She threw the bag of film canisters into the trunk, covering them with an old blanket, then got in and drove. She didn't head home, didn't go to Linda's in Riverside. Instead, she drove aimlessly, taking random turns, checking constantly for headlights behind her. After an hour of paranoid navigation, she was sure she wasn't followed. She pulled into a 24-hour Walmart parking lot in Glendale and called Frank Torres from a burner phone app she downloaded. "I need you to scan those films tonight," she said without preamble. "Now. Right now. It's not safe to wait. Sarah, it's almost midnight. I don't open until 9. People broke into the studio. While I was inside, they were going to destroy everything. They mentioned my daughters. If I don't get these films documented immediately, if I don't get this evidence secured, they're going to kill me and burn everything Marilyn wanted. Preserved." Frank was silent for a long moment. Then his voice steady despite the fear she could hear underneath. "I live above the shop. Come to the back door. Give me 30 minutes to set up the equipment." Sarah spent the next 30 minutes in the Walmart parking lot, watching every car that passed, jumping at every sound. She called Linda to check on the girls. They were fine, already asleep, excited about their unexpected sleepover with Grandma. At 12:40 a.m., Sarah pulled up to the Abadi Azabiti, back entrance of Frank's camera shop. He was waiting, door already open, looking pale but determined. "Bring them inside, quickly." Frank's studio above the shop was a combination of workspace and museum. Vintage cameras lined the walls. Enlargers and developing equipment filled one corner. But in the center was his scanning station, a high-end digital setup designed specifically for preserving old film. "This is going to take hours," Frank said as Sarah unpacked the canisters carefully. "High-resolution scans, proper exposure correction, the works. But if these are what you think they are, if they're evidence of what happened to Marilyn Monroe, then we do it right." Sarah nodded, too exhausted and frightened to speak. She slumped in a chair while Frank worked, his trembling hands suddenly steady as he fell into the rhythm of his craft. The first canister was from August 1962, August 4th to be specific, the day before Marilyn died. Frank carefully removed the negatives, examined them under magnification, Then began the scanning process. As each image appeared on his computer screen, properly exposed and enhanced, Sarah felt her understanding of history shift. The images showed Marilyn in Whitmore's studio, looking worse than Sarah had ever seen in any photograph. Gaunt, exhausted, her famous blonde hair lank and unwashed, dark circles under her eyes that no makeup could hide. But her expression was fierce, determined. This was a woman who knew she was in danger, but refused to give up. In several photos, Marilyn was holding up documents to the camera, clearly creating a record. Frank zoomed in, enhancing the images until the text became readable. Diary pages. In Marilyn's handwriting. Sarah recognized it from biographies she'd read. July 28th. Bobby called again. Told me to stop contacting him. Said I was becoming a problem. A security liability. What does that mean? I never asked to know about Cuba or the mob or any of it. He told me things. Mithinting. Bed after. He wanted me to know how important he was. And now I'm the problem? July 30th. Men following me again. Black cars, government plates. I'm not paranoid. They're really there. Jack won't return my calls. Bobby says he can't be seen with me anymore. I have become inconvenient. Dangerous to them. August 1st. I've told James everything. Given him my diary. The letters. Photographs. If something happens to me, he'll know what to do. He promised to tell the truth. I believe him. Frank sat back in his chair, his face pale. My God. She knew. She knew they were going to kill her. They worked through the night. Canister after canister. July showed Marilyn's decline, her growing fear. June showed her still hopeful, still in love, still believing the powerful men who used her might actually protect her. May showed her vibrant, alive, unaware of what was coming. But August was the key. August was her final testimony. The last roll, dated August 4th, 1962, was devastating. Showed Marilyn in Whitmore's studio, methodically going through her evidence. Letters from Robert Kennedy, written on Justice Department letterhead. Photographs of them together at private locations. More diary pages detailing conversations about government operations, about CIA plans to assassinate Castro, about FBI surveillance of Martin Luther King Jr., about mob connections to political fundraising. Things that an attorney general should never have told a Hollywood actress. But Robert Kennedy had been arrogant, had believed his charm could control her, had underestimated her intelligence and her determination to be taken seriously. And when he'd realized his mistake, when he'd understood that Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a beautiful fool, but a woman who paid attention, who remembered, who wrote things down, he'd made her disappear. In the final image from August 4th, Marilyn was looking directly at the camera, holding a note written in large letters clearly meant to be readable. In a photograph. If I die, it wasn't an accident. I'm not suicidal. I'm not crazy. I'm scared. Bobby Kennedy has been threatening me for weeks. His people follow me everywhere. They've been in my house. I know too much, and they know I know. I kept records of everything because I thought it would protect me. But now I think it's what's going to kill me. James, if you're reading this, if I'm gone, please tell the truth. Don't let them say I was just another Hollywood tragedy. I was murdered. Norma Jean. Norma Jean. Marilyn's real name. The name she signed when she was being herself, not the manufactured persona. Sarah's hands trembled as she read those words. This was Marilyn Monroe's last testament, created less than 24 hours before her death, hidden for 62 years. Frank enhanced the image, cleaned it up, saved multiple copies to different drives. He looked at Sarah with tears streaming down his face. This changes everything. Everything we thought we knew about. Her death, about the Kennedys, about that entire era. What do I do with it? Sarah whispered. If I go public, they'll kill me. Those men tonight, they were going to burn the building. They know about my daughters. But if I don't expose this, if I let them suppress it again, then Marilyn died for nothing. James died for nothing. My great-aunt spent 62 years protecting evidence for nothing. Frank was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he said, You make it impossible to suppress. You don't give it to one journalist or one outlet. You give it to everyone. Simultaneously, you create such a flood of information spread across so many platforms that they can't stop it all. How? We make copies. Lots of copies. We reach out to major news organizations, the Times, the Post, the Guardian. We contact historians, museum curators. We send packages to universities. We upload to secure servers. We make sure that if anything happens to you, the evidence still gets out. We create a dead man's switch. They spent the rest of the night doing exactly that. Frank had contacts in the journalism world, historians he'd worked with on preservation projects. Sarah reached out to investigative reporters she'd researched. They assembled a list of 20 organizations and individuals who could be trusted with the material. By dawn, they had a plan. Sarah would hold a press conference in 72 hours, giving the major outlets time to verify the evidence and prepare their stories. Everything would go live simultaneously. The photographs, the diary pages, the documentation of the conspiracy, all of it released at once across multiple platforms. And if anything happened to Sarah before that press conference, if she missed a single 12-hour check-in, everything would be released immediately, unedited, raw, dumped onto every social media platform simultaneously. Sarah left Frank's shop at 7 a.m. with multiple encrypted drives, each containing the complete archive. She drove to a storage facility and rented 3 units under different names, placing copies in each one. She mailed copies to lawyers, to her ex-mother-in-law, to Dorothy Callahan with instructions on what to do if she disappeared. Then she went to pick up her daughters from Linda's in Riverside. Emma and Sophie ran to her, talking excitedly about their sleepover, about Grandma Linda's cat, about the pancakes they'd had for breakfast. Sarah held them both, inhaling the strawberry scent of their shampoo, feeling their warmth, their innocence, their trust that Mom would keep them safe. "Are we going home now?" Sophie asked. "Not yet, baby. We're going to stay with Grandma Linda a few more days. I have something important to finish." "Is it about the building you inherited?" Emma asked. She was 12, old enough to sense when something serious was happening. "Is that why those men were watching our school?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "What men?" "There was a black car, parked across the street for 3 days. Same car every day. My teacher noticed it too. She called the principal. They'd been watching her daughters. These monsters had been stalking children." Sarah's rage crystallized into determination. She was done being afraid, done being threatened. These people had killed Marilyn Monroe. They'd killed James Whitmore. They'd terrorized her great-aunt Helen into silence for 6 decades. They'd threatened Sarah's children, and she was going to burn their entire conspiracy to the ground. Sarah spent the next 2 days in a safe house the LAPD arranged through Dorothy Callahan's connections. The attorney had called in favors, explained the situation to a detective she trusted. The detective, a woman named Maria Santos, had taken one look at the evidence and made a phone call that resulted in protective custody. "This is real," Detective Santos said after reviewing the scanned photographs. "This is going to explode. You understand that, right? When this goes public, you're going to be the most famous person in America for about 6 months. Your life will never be normal again." "My life hasn't been normal since I inherited that building," Sarah replied. "At least this way, Marilyn gets justice, and my daughters get to grow up knowing their mother did something brave." Richard Strauss called one final time, 48 hours before the scheduled press conference. $750,000, he said. "You sign over the building and every copy of every photograph you made. You sign an NDA. You take the money and disappear. This is the last offer." "Or what?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "Or you don't live to see those publications go to print. Neither do your daughters. We can make people disappear, Ms. Mitchell. We've been doing it for decades." Sarah had been recording the call. She smiled grimly. "You just threatened to murder me and my children on a recorded line, Mr. Strauss. Thank you for that. It'll make excellent evidence." She could hear his sharp intake of breath. "You're recording this? Every call, every threat, every attempt at intimidation. It's all documented. And you want to know the best part? If anything happens to me, if I miss even one 12-hour check-in, everything goes public immediately. Not carefully edited. Not with journalistic balance. The raw evidence, dumped everywhere at once. Every photograph, every diary page, every piece of documentation showing that Robert Kennedy had Marilyn Monroe killed and that your employers have been suppressing evidence of that murder for 62 years. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Powerful men who think they can control the truth, who think ordinary people like me will be too scared to fight back. But here's what you didn't understand, Mr. Strauss. I was already drowning. I was 3 days from homelessness. I had nothing left to lose, and a woman with nothing. To lose and daughters to protect is the most dangerous person in the world. She hung up and immediately sent the recording to Detective Santos and to 3 of the journalists she'd been working with. The next 48 hours were a blur. Sarah stayed in the safe house with Emma and Sophie, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy while the world prepared to detonate. The girls did homework, watched TV, played card games. They could sense the tension, but Sarah tried to shield them from the details. Detective Santos assigned 2 officers to guard them around the clock. The department is taking this seriously, she said. You've got evidence of a government conspiracy to commit murder. That doesn't go away just because the people involved are dead. There are family legacies to protect, political dynasties, and people who've built careers on protecting those legacies. On the 3rd day, at exactly 9 a.m. Pacific time, everything went live. The Los Angeles Times published a front-page story with the headline, Marilyn Monroe's Final Testament. New evidence suggests actress was murdered. The Washington Post ran an investigative piece titled, The Kennedy Cover-Up, How Robert Kennedy's Affair with Marilyn Monroe Became a Government Conspiracy. The Guardian in London published Hollywood's Darkest Secret, the photographs that prove Marilyn Monroe knew she was going to die. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, every major network all ran breaking news alerts. Within an hour, social media exploded. Justice for Marilyn trended worldwide. The photographs, carefully curated but devastating in their impact, circulated everywhere. Marilyn's final note, her prediction of her own murder, went viral. Historians appeared on television discussing the implications. Legal experts debated whether the case could be reopened. Kennedy family representatives released statements denying everything, but the evidence was too strong, too detailed, too well preserved. By noon, the documentary Trailer Frank had helped coordinate with Netflix had 20 million views. By evening, it had 50 million. Sarah watched it all from the safe house, holding her daughters close. Emma, old enough to understand some of what was happening, looked at her mother with new eyes. You did this, Mom. You exposed all this? I did what Marilyn asked someone to do 62 years ago. I told the truth. Were you scared? Terrified. But sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when you're terrified. Sophie, younger and less interested in the news, just wanted to know when they could go home. Soon, baby, Sarah promised. Soon. The death threats started almost immediately. Sarah's phone, her email, her social media, all flooded with messages from people furious that she'd tarnished the Kennedy legacy. But there were other messages too. Thousands of them. Messages of support. Messages from women thanking her for giving Marilyn a voice. Messages from historians grateful that truth had finally won over cover-up. One message came from a woman who identified herself as the granddaughter of Helen Morrison. Sarah's cousin, apparently, someone she'd never met. My grandmother talked about you in her final days, the message read. She said you were the strong one, the one who would finally do what needed to be done. She was right. Thank you for honoring her 62 years of protection. Thank you for giving Marilyn her voice back. The building at 8491 Franklin Avenue was seized by the FBI as part of their reopened investigation into Monroe's death. The film room, what little remained of it after the intruder's destruction, was processed as a crime scene. The men who'd broken in were identified from Sarah's video. 2 were arrested. Richard Strauss was arrested on charges of conspiracy to destroy evidence and making terroristic threats. The investigation expanded quickly. Old FBI files were reopened. CIA documents were subpoenaed. The truth that had been buried for 62 years was finally clawing its way into daylight. And the world would never see Marilyn Monroe the same way again. Not as a tragic Hollywood casualty. Not as a mentally unstable actress who killed herself. But as a woman who was murdered because she knew too much. Because she refused to stay silent. Because she was smarter and braver than the powerful men who underestimated her. 6 months later, Sarah Mitchell stood on the steps of the building that would become the Marilyn Monroe Truth Center. The property had been returned to her after the FBI concluded their investigation. She'd sold it for $18 million to a nonprofit that would preserve it as a memorial and museum. Sarah kept $2 million for herself, enough to buy a modest house in a good school district, enough to set up college funds for Emma and Sophie, enough for security and stability and breathing room. The rest went to causes Marilyn had supported. Mental health advocacy, because Marilyn had been gaslit and labeled crazy when she was actually being stalked and threatened. Children's charities, because Marilyn had never been able to have the family she desperately wanted. And programs for single mothers, women like Sarah who were struggling and underestimated and fighting to survive. At the dedication ceremony, Sarah stood at the podium with her daughters beside her. The crowd included journalists, historians, Hollywood celebrities, and women who'd followed her story and felt inspired by it. Marilyn Monroe died on August 5, 1962, Sarah began. But her voice was silenced long before that, by men who saw her as an object, as a liability, as something to be controlled or eliminated. She tried to speak the truth. She created a record, made sure someone would know what really happened to her. And then she was killed. Sarah paused, looking at the building behind her, at the plaque that read, "Keeper of Secrets, Guardian of Truth," with Helen Morrison's name engraved below. My great-aunt Helen Morrison spent 62 years protecting that truth, waiting for the right moment, the right person. She chose me not because I was strong or brave or qualified. She chose me because I was desperate, because I had everything to lose and nothing left to fear. Because sometimes the people who change history aren't the powerful ones. They're the ones with their backs against the wall, fighting for their children, refusing to stay silent one more day. Vibardin applauded. Cameras flashed. Emma squeezed her hand. Sarah continued. This museum isn't just about Marilyn Monroe. It's about every woman who was silenced, every person who knew the truth but was too afraid to speak it, every guardian who protected evidence, sometimes for decades, waiting for the moment when truth could finally win. She looked directly at the cameras. If you're watching this and you know a secret that matters, if you have evidence of wrongdoing, if you're sitting on the truth that powerful people want buried, I want you to know something. You're not alone. And your voice matters. Even if you're broke, even if you're scared, even if everyone tells you to stay silent. Especially then. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from the powerful. It comes from the desperate, the dismissed, the underestimated. From single mothers with eviction notices and daughters to protect. From ordinary people who decide that enough is enough. And when those people find their voice, when they refuse to be silenced, nothing can stop them. Sarah finished her speech to a standing ovation. Later, she gave interviews. Anderson Cooper, 60 Minutes, The New York Times. She wrote a book that became a bestseller. She testified before Congress about government accountability and the protection of whistleblowers. But mostly, she raised her daughters. Emma and Sophie grew up knowing that their mother had been brave when it mattered, that she'd protected them while also protecting something bigger. Truth, justice, the memory of a woman who'd been silenced but refused to be forgotten. Every year on August 5th, the anniversary of Marilyn Monroe's death, Sarah visits the museum. She stands in front of the final photograph, the one taken on August 4th, 1962, where Marilyn holds her note predicting her own murder. And Sarah whispers the same thing every time. I kept your promise. The world knows now. You can rest. The studio that everyone mocked Sarah for inheriting. The building her siblings tried to steal. The property that powerful men tried to suppress for over 6 decades had been exactly what her great-aunt intended it to be. Not just an inheritance, a mission. A trust passed from one unlikely guardian to another across generations until finally the right person came along at the right moment to do what needed to be done. Sarah Mitchell had been that person, not despite her poverty and desperation, but because of it, because she had nothing to lose and everything to fight for, because she understood what it meant to be underestimated, dismissed, and counted out, just like Marilyn Monroe had been. The conspiracy that killed Marilyn thought they'd buried her secrets forever. They thought James Whitmore's evidence had died with him. They thought Helen Morrison would take it to her grave. and they thought Sarah Mitchell would be too weak, too desperate, too afraid to fight back. They were wrong about all of them. Sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who have nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. Sometimes a bankrupt single mother with 2 daughters to protect is exactly the person the world needs to bring down a 62-year conspiracy. Sometimes justice doesn't come from the powerful. It comes from the desperate, the dismissed, the underestimated. And when it does, when those people finally find their voice and refuse to be silenced, when they decide that truth matters more than safety, that their children's future matters more than their own fear, nothing in the world can stop them. Not threats, not money, not power, not even 6 decades of carefully constructed lies. Because truth has a way of surviving, of waiting, of finding the right guardian and at the right moment. And when it does, the world changes. Have you ever inherited something that changed your life? Have you ever discovered a truth that powerful people wanted hidden? Have you ever been underestimated by people who should have known better? Share your story in the comments below. Let the world know that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And if this journey of courage and justice inspired you, subscribe for more stories about people who refused to stay silent, who fought back against impossible odds, who changed history not because they were powerful, but because they were desperate enough to be brave. Because that's where real change comes from. Not from the top down, but from the bottom up. From people who have nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. From people exactly like you.